everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. Let's spend this hour getting after what matters. What do you say? Let's get after it. We're going to start with breaking news. Louisiana became the first state to require all public schools to display the 10 Commandments in every classroom, kindergarten to state-funded universities. My take, doesn't bother me as someone raised Catholic, but it is a step towards Christian nationalism, as envisioned by the Rights Project 2025, which you better learn about if you don't know about it. And these people better be careful, because if this country is someday a Muslim majority, are they going to be okay with their rules being imposed? Now, I would prefer that the move here is to commit to teaching these values in school again, teach citizenship, teach these values that are not only religious but secular as memorialized in the 10 Commandments. But that would be about making kids better. And that's not what this is about. This is about political advantage. And the law is clearly an obstacle to this move. And the people doing this on the right are banking on it being controversial, because it'll be part of their victimization of the Christians as part of their Christian nationalist agenda. In a true paradox, they endeavor to inculcate Christianity in the public square with the help of Donald Trump, a man who exemplifies Christian virtues about as poorly as any candidate I can think of ever. So you got to look at this two ways: law and politics. And we have masters of both. Now, I did a quick test today of people who were in favor of this move. And I asked them, oh, good, you like it? Yeah, I like, name all 10 Commandments. Almost none knew, okay? And when I asked them a question, true or false, how many versions of the 10 Commandments are there? Almost all of them said, well, one. No, there are at least 3. Now, again, this doesn't surprise me, because it's not about the facts of the matter. It's just about advantage. It's about feel. It's about politics. So, for those who care, these are the 10 Commandments that Louisiana has chosen. These are the St. James or the Protestant version, which was interesting to me because, you know, Louisiana is one of the top 10 states when it comes to Catholic populations. What's the difference? Well, for whatever reason, the Catholics split coveting into 2. So you covet your neighbor's house, you covet your neighbor's wife and goods. They split it into 2. I guess they wanted to bring it home that you got to leave other people's stuff away, leave jealousy out of the way. But look, it makes sense because the evangelical movement is behind this move. So they would want the Protestant version. Is it good law? Is it good politics? My answers are no to the first, yes to the second. So let's start with the light, and then we'll get to the heat. For the light, which is the law, we bring in Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Professor, thank you for joining us on short notice. What is the short answer to what happens when this is challenged federally?
Under the existing law, in order for the 10 Commandments to be shown, they have to be shown as part of a secular historical exhibit. They can't be predominantly intended to foster religion. But we have a new Supreme Court since those cases, and this Supreme Court is much more sympathetic to a religion, particularly the Judeo-Christian religion. So there's no predicting with absolute certainty how the court would come out. Clearly this is intended to be religious. It isn't intended to be secular. I know the 10 Commandments. I can recite them. And the first 4, according to the Jewish tradition, first 3, according to the Catholic and Protestant tradition, have nothing to do with good citizenship. Do not make a graven image. Do not take the name of the Lord in vain. God damn it. These are very religious orientations. Yeah, don't kill. Even don't kill is controversial because the Hebrew is lo tirtzach. Do not murder.
Don't murder.
Catholic and Protestant versions say don't kill, which has implications both for abortion and the death penalty. Look, we are the most divided country since the Civil War. Do we really now want to divide between religions? This is Judeo-Christian. It's not Muslim. It's not Hindu. It's not Buddhist. It establishes a religion. So it's wrong as a matter of legal and constitutional policy, though I cannot predict for you now how this Supreme Court would come out on this particular issue. If it follows precedent, it would say, no, you can't have that in school, particularly because schools are places where young people can be influenced, different than having a large Ten Commandment monument in front of a courthouse. So I think the court will come out and strike it down, but I'm not absolutely positive.
So I wanted Dershowitz on for two reasons tonight, other than the obvious, which is I love talking to him. One is he's a mentor of mine, and two, I was shocked when I heard from my producer, Ben, that Dershowitz had said, well, I don't know, this is a pretty religious Supreme Court. Maybe they'll move away from precedent, because I would have never thought you would say that. But what does that mean, that Alan Dershowitz is up to the Supreme Court justices have a different take on what's a no-brainer legal issue?
Well, let me be very clear. I have never, ever stated my preferences when I predict how the Supreme Court will come out. That's why I've been so accurate over the years in making predictions. I hope and pray, pray that the Supreme Court strikes this down. But I'm not going to predict that this Supreme Court with Alito and Thomas and even the Chief Justice, who is, balanced, even Justice Breyer, who was quite secular and quite liberal, allowed a monument on the Supreme Court as long as it was part of a secular historical display. Remember, too, in the Supreme Court building itself, where I clerked 55, 60 years ago, there is Muhammad, Moses, and all the lawgivers, but it's part of a secular historical context. Right. And so, I want the Supreme Court to strike this down. That's my hope, but I don't know for sure that this Supreme Court will.
Alan Dershowitz, thank you very much, Professor, for laying it out for us. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. All right, so that is the legal part of this. And, the rationale gets a little spooky. I mean, are they just going to take a different path on the basis of politics? I want to bring in Bill O'Reilly because I think this is a great political issue for the right. I think it gives them high ground. The assumption in America is this is a Christian nation, even if the founders didn't want it perceived that way in terms of its public function. I think it's a winning issue for them, especially if it gets struck down, and I think that's why Louisiana did it in the first place. What do you think of this play?
I'm going to be Mr. Hand, and you're going to be Spicoli right now, okay? Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So in 2005, you're Spicoli, believe me. 2005, Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that you could have a display of the Ten Commandments at the Texas State Capitol in Austin. They did that because it was, in their opinion, the 5 justices that ruled they could have it, a passive display. All right, it was simply there to show people that part of our culture, not the entire culture, all right, was based on the commandments that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. And Professor Dershowitz left out that Moses is in the Supreme Court, too. So he is a religious figure.
No, he said
there is no question, and he didn't say Moses. He said the lawgivers.
Yeah, he did. But go ahead. He said Moses and the lawgivers. But go ahead. Right. Go ahead. He did. But
no, he didn't. But okay. So anyway, I wrote about this in Killing the Witches, which your wife took from you, so you didn't read it. And this all goes back, and this is what the Supreme Court will rule on, okay? It's history. It's history. So Patrick Henry and Roger Sherman from Connecticut wanted the United States to be a Christian nation. They wanted it defined in the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, and Thomas Jefferson did not. It was a massive brawl over this in Philadelphia. I mean, chairs flying. And it was really intense, but the Madison crew won. There was a quote floating around for years that Madison wanted the Ten Commandments to be the basis of U.S. law. That quote was phony. It was an amazing story. Look it up. But it got traction. Madison never said that. What is true and what is historical is that we are a country founded on Judeo, I say it differently than Dershowitz, Christian philosophy. philosophy. And if you look at the Ten Commandments, excluding the part about the deity, you'll see that rule of law, individual rights, personal responsibility is behind all of the dictums. And the Founding Fathers knew that. So they didn't object to any kind of display of the Ten Commandments. Now, Louisiana. You're right, Cuomo, and that hurts me to say, that this will become a partisan issue, because neither side really wants the truth. If the Louisiana public schools display the Ten Commandments, they absolutely have a responsibility to their students to explain it in a historical context.
Yeah.
Right? Mr.
I think it's going to fail. I think it's going to fail the test. They laid out a test with the two main cases here. The Texas State one was a stand away because Breyer was persuaded by the fact that it was part of a diverse show of different views of morality and presentations over time. So it was basically an exhibit in what was seen as not just an inculcation of a specific faith. This seems to be precisely an inculcation of a specific faith, and had the Louisiana state legislature, Christianity.
What faith did they? Wait. The Ten Commandments emanated from Moses, the Jewish faith.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so what faith are they promoting?
Christianity. And if they had assigned a curriculum to it, if they had assigned a curriculum to it, they'd be in much better shape. If they had said, we are doing this, as you put it, a philosophical enterprise, they'd be okay. But that's not what this is about for them. This is the same thing they did in Alabama with Roy Moore, and I think they're going to wind up in the same exact place. But politically, I think it's a win.
It's not the same as Moore, because Moore was just right out there saying we want to impose Christian nationalism, the way you put it. He
wanted the Ten Commandments in the Supreme Court. He wanted the Ten Commandments on display.
He wanted everybody in Alabama to be a Christian nationalist. That's what Moore wanted. I don't know how Louisiana's going to handle it. I know the governor's a smart man. I think when it will be challenged, of course, that the lawyers for the state will come out and say this is an educational, historical thing. And I believe the Supreme Court will rule 6-3 on that basis, that you are allowed to have it as long as the public schools do not promote a specific religion. You just ignore the Jewish factor in all of this. I don't know why, because the Jewish people are basically believing in the Ten Commandments as well. So then if you say it's an imposition of religion, what religion? What religion?
Well,
okay.
Landry used
the
word
it falls apart.
Christian tradition. Landry used the words Christian tradition.
Well, he should have said Judeo-Christian.
That Jews gave it to us.
Well, after he watches us and gets the lesson from Mr. Hand, and Spicoli is writing it all down. You can see him, his hands. He should change it, because that's the accurate historical thing. It's fascinating in this country. It really is, because the witches that were burned at Salem, and that's what I wrote the book about, that led to the secularism that we have now. Because I think that without that Patrick Henry and Roger Sherman would have won back then, because the colonies were extremely religious.
I would like this to be the opposite of what it is. Teach the values. Make it part of your curriculum. Call it citizenship if you want. Teach the values. Teach what loving mercy is, which is the foundation of all Christianity and Judaism, borrowed from the Torah. Tikkun olam, to repair the universe, to be a collaborator in creation. Teilhard de Chardin, Christian scientist, Catholic paleontologist. Do that. That's not what Louisiana wants. It wants all show, no go. But it will work well and make Christians feel like they're being victimized, which is very, very explosive in the current political environment. And I believe we'll be there as soon as it's questioned. And I think it's a smart move. I want to hear how the Democrats deal with it as well. But Dusty sent me a quote for you from, you remember who played Spicoli, by the way? He's one of yours.
Yes, I do. That Sean Penn guy. And he was brilliant in that.
Oh, he's always brilliant. But his famous quote to Mr. Hand, all I need are some tasty waves, a cool buzz, and I'm fine. Bill O'Reilly, I appreciate you weighing in on this timely news.
One more thing, Spicoli's doing 10 to 30 in a California penitentiary right now. So you got to be careful. Got to be careful about what you do.
But the actor will be here with us next week talking about his new movie, Daddy-O, which is another phenomenon for him. Bill O'Reilly, thank you very much. Appreciate you, as always. Let's take a break. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. When we come back, we're going to get the Democratic take on this. Now, today is Juneteenth. You know this, right? So I have Representative Clyburn. I'm a big fan of his. I believe he represents everything that public service is supposed to be about. What is his take on the day? What is his take on this news that Biden sees? I don't know the right word. I'll let him define it, but it's big erosion with African-American voters. Does he buy that? Or is it just a poll? And what does he think about this move by Louisiana and where Democrats should be positioned on it? The congressman from South Carolina, the legend, James Clyburn, next. June 19th, also known as Juneteenth, federal holiday commemorating back in 1865, slavery ending. 250,000 slaves were freed in Texas. Remember, this took a long time. The idea that the slaves were freed at the end of the Civil War, not so true. Fast forward to today. What is the relevance of the black vote on the Democratic nominee, President Joe Biden? Very interesting. I was on with a conservative today. You know what? I'm going to bring in James Clyburn first and then tell him what this conservative radio host said to me today, which I thought was a very interesting push. Now, the black vote specifically, black females were huge for Joe Biden in the last election in 2020. Polling shows a dip. Now, some will say that the dip is almost like by 50%. It's hard to imagine that. But let's talk to South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn. It is good to see you always, sir. Appreciate you, as you know. First, what do you want people to know about and care about on this day?
Well, thank you very much. I think the big thing about Juneteenth to me is demonstrative of what happens when people fail to communicate. As you know, the Emancipation Proclamations were written in 1862, the one affecting the former slave states was to be effective January 1, 1863. Yet, it was June 19, 2.5 years later, 1865, when the people of Galveston, Texas, were communicated with. And so I've been saying to people, this is an example of what happens when you fail to communicate. 250,000 people remained enslaved for 2.5 years after they were free because nobody told them that they were. And so as we go through life, especially politically, we should remember it is very important to communicate, talk, listen, and see can you find common ground. You aren't going to find it otherwise.
It's also very important, Congressman, that people accept the outcomes in this democracy, a lesson we've also been reminded of recently. So I'm on the radio with this guy, Lars Larson, big conservative. And he says, I love Juneteenth because it reminds everybody of how the Republicans finally freed the slaves and got them away from all those nasty Democrats in the South. And it was an interesting pivot for him into the latest polling that shows that the African-American population, known shorthand as the black vote, may be going against the Democrats in this election. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. But then I would also say to the person you talk to, what it tells me, the mere fact that Reconstruction came to an end in 1876. What brought it to an end? A Republican, Rutherford B. Hayes, struck a deal with those same Southern white supremacists in the South, ended Reconstruction so that he could become president of the United States. Rutherford B. Hayes was a Republican. Yes, the Republican Abraham Lincoln did sign the Emancipation Proclamation. He did lobby incessantly for the 13th Amendment, which really freed slaves. But it was a double cross by the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes that brought on Jim Crow and second-class citizenships for blacks. Nobody seemed to want to remember Rutherford B. Hayes' role in this.
It's because it's not convenient. So the argument is the blacks in inner cities have gotten tired of things not getting better for them. Now, putting aside it treats the black population as a monolith, that everybody lives in the ghetto. But there is movement in the polls that shows that the traditional high watermark of expected African-American participation on the Democratic side of the ballot may not be as solid. Your response?
Well, it's always been that way. Go back to 2012 when Barack Obama was running for re-election, and you will find similar polling. So I don't buy that. If anybody tells me that they believe that Donald Trump is going to get 30% of African-American men voting for him, as I have said before, I've got some bridges on one of these islands down here, John's Island particularly, that I'll be glad to sell to you. That ain't going to happen. And in large measure...
You saw what happened up in the Bronx.
Yes, I know what happened up in the Bronx. Nobody showed up. No blacks did. I know what happened in Detroit at a black church, when 80% of the people in that black church were Trumpers, white Trumpers at that. So that's not going to happen. Let's just look at what really has gotten us to where we are. And I will remind my Republican friends that after all of the Jim Crow, it was a Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision. And quite frankly, the Chief Justice of that Supreme Court was Earl Warren, a Republican, because he also had the Democratic nomination when he ran for governor of California. So this is not about partisan politics. But if you want to be partisan about it, look at Lyndon Johnson's role in all of this in the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And to have a Trump supporter says that things were fine during the Jim Crow era. And then came Lyndon Johnson and H.E.W., and he said that disdainfully. So he has a problem with Lyndon Johnson signing and promoting the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Then I would like to understand what in the world you're thinking about.
Well, that's good perspective. That's why I love having you on, Congressman Clyburn. Thank you very much for being with us on Juneteenth and to talk about the state of play in politics. You are always welcome here to make the case to the American people, and I wish you the best, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Take care. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Why the affection? Because I respect people who do the job over time and fight the good fight. And nobody's in front of him on that list. All right. Here's something that we should be focused on and we're not. Fentanyl, we've never had a drug kill us as easy, as cheaply, and as ubiquitously everywhere as this is. Hundreds of people a day. It just got easier to get. You know where? Social media. I want to show you how dealers are getting kids, your kids, my kids, Snapchat, Instagram. They've got a whole code that we've figured out, and we're going to show you it step by step so you can protect your kids and get loud with your lawmakers to do their damn job. It's killing people. Next. All these fake fights and culture wars. I would just love for a politician to say, hey, vote for me. I want one job. I'm going after fentanyl. Fight a real enemy. But instead, they just watch. More than 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl overdoses. We've never seen anything like it. The opioid is 50 times more powerful than heroin. Only a little bit can be fatal. It's cheap and easy to make, and they're selling it everywhere. We just heard another story, 19-year-old freshman in college. She died after taking one fentanyl pill. She thought it was a Percocet. They sell them as Perc 30s, which is a very common painkiller, and they lace it with fentanyl because it's cheaper. You know where she got the pill? Social media. Dealers are using Snapchat and Instagram, and to deadly effect. Now, in a few minutes, we took some time today. Dusty had a great idea to have the staff, the team, show you step by step how easy it is to find online. But I want to bring in Sam Chapman first. He lost his 16-year-old son, Sammy, to fentanyl. A dealer reached him on Snapchat. Unknowingly, he wound up buying a fentanyl-laced pill. The Chapmans are trying to put their pain to purpose and trying to go after Snapchat, to fight, to get laws changed, to prevent these lethal drug transactions on social media. They'll flag you if you say the wrong thing politically, but you can buy the deadliest drug we know. Mr. Chapman joins us now. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity, and I very much respect what you and your family are trying to do here. What do you want the other parents who are watching tonight to know?
That it could be them. Don't think it can't be. And get some Narcan in your house just in case. Even if it's not your kid, it could be one of their friends.
Now, the unsuspicious says, yeah, but my kid's not using anything like that. Maybe a little weed, maybe this, but, you know, they're not messing around with that. This kid must have had an advanced problem. What do you want them to know about Sammy and what you learned?
Well, he wasn't doing that sort of thing, and this was a first for him. And, you know, they're putting fentanyl in weed, in loose drugs. They're putting it together like Smarties, making rainbow fentanyl around Halloween. It's terrible what they're doing. The cartels are a multi-billion-dollar business that are incredibly sophisticated at distributing this and marketing it, and we're up against a behemoth.
What do you now understand about the role of social media?
Well, social media is trying to addict our children, and in particular, the ones with our kids on, like Snapchat, the drug dealers and the pimps. There are all sorts of harms going on, but fentanyl is the worst, and people are dying. We're losing 200 a day. 73,000 in 2022. The chemicals are coming from China, and China had 0 deaths in 2022. So we've got to do something to stop this at the source, and then the social media companies are solving the last mile problem for the drug dealers.
When you look at Sammy's situation, what did you learn about how the dealers were able to contact him and how they were basically offering him a menu of different types of drugs, yes?
That's right, and they use emojis to get by the filters and slang and code words. They offered him something for free because fentanyl is so addictive. It takes 2 grains of salt worth of fentanyl to kill a child, and once you've had it, you're addicted for life. So they're giving it away. They're dosing it for addicts, but those doses are enough to kill a child. And they're also finding the weaknesses in our drug supply and counterfeiting those drugs. So ADHD meds are running short, and they're putting fentanyl into fake ADHD meds. They're doing it with some cancer drugs that there are shortages of as well. And it really galls me that China is not only sending over the chemicals, they're sending over the pill molds to the cartels to make the counterfeit drugs.
Yeah, another big issue with our national security when you start talking about the border is the cartel's role in this. And Mr. Chapman just gave you guys a really good tip. You know, this generation of kids grew up with brown bottles. They grew up with prescription drugs in a way that you and I didn't. And they're familiar with them and they're comfortable with these drugs because they've been prescribed. So the dealers know that. And they'll say, hey, I know Adderall is really tough to get. I can get it for you cheap. And I've got a hybrid of it. And the suggestion's very strong. So some people are going to hear what you're saying, and they're going to be like, what do you mean emojis? Like, how does this even work? We had our team show how easily this can be done. I think it was my guy, Jimmy Lucci. James Lucci did it for us today. Let's play the clip, Dusty, for me and Mr. Chapman to show everybody how easy it was for Lucci to get what he wanted.
I start by just typing oxycodone. And then when I do that, I go to tags. I can search, go to tags. It immediately comes up with a disclaimer, but I could swipe it away. And then you immediately see every state or major city in America and abroad having these options. And we can click into any one of them, and I can immediately click on something like this where it says shop is open and gives me the tags to reach out to. Another easy way to buy drugs on Snapchat, I immediately go to the search bar here and type in plug me in, which is a phrase for hook me up. And it'll bring me to a bunch of different accounts that I can add and eventually reach out to. And with Snapchat, it's anonymous, and usually chats delete right after they're sent.
Now, two things. First, we blurred for privacy issues. Second, don't get it twisted. Don't say we're showing people how to get the drugs. Believe me, the information is already out there. I'm trying to bring you up to speed on this. This isn't really, kids aren't watching this right now and saying this is how I can get drugs. They're already there and susceptible. It's for us to catch up to this problem. What's the last thing you want people to remember, Mr. Chapman?
Putting your kids on social media these days is like dropping them off in the worst drug-filled neighborhoods and hoping they'll do okay.
You got to have an uncomfortable relationship with your kids these days. You got to be nosy. You got to remind them that it's not their phone, it's your phone. Let them get a job and start paying for it. Then it's their service. You got to have the fights to avoid the pain. I hear it from parent after parent. And Sam, if there's anything that I can do to help with your move and what you're doing with your group and spreading awareness, we are always a call away. There but for the grace go my kids and my loved ones. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Sam Chapman, you can look it up. You can see what he's doing with his group. And the need is overwhelming. Why don't our leaders give a damn? The break, 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Speaking of give a damn, another day, where are the hostages? Where are the American hostages? I thought we were going to do a unilateral deal. What's going on? 130 or more. 8 months. Remember Hirsch Goldberg? Remember we got this message from him that shows he was alive, at least at that point? His parents will never give up. They have a message for the White House. He is a dual citizen. Next. Here's the one thing that people can't shake. If Hamas returned the hostages, then there would be leverage to say, well, now we have to look at what Israel is doing because they don't have the justification of going after the hostages anymore. But they haven't. Why? Because they're okay with what is happening. Hamas believes it plays to their advantage, and that's why they won't return the hostages. 8 months. We know what happened on October 7th. We know the over 1,000 people, the massacre. We know the hostages, some 240 from Israel to Gaza. One of those taken, 23-year-old Israeli U.S. citizen Hirsch Goldberg Poland. Now, last seen in April, video released by Hamas asking the Israeli government to bring home the hostages. There he is. You notice his left arm. He lost it in the massacre and has survived. Thank God, at least to that point. last glimpse Hirsch's parents had of their son. The Biden administration now says it will consider negotiating directly with Hamas to secure the release of 5 American hostages if current ceasefire talks with Israel fail, which they likely will. How do the parents feel about that? Hirsch's parents, Rachel and John, have a message for the White House, and they join us now. Thank you for taking the opportunity. What do you want people to know about your opinion, Rachel, I'll start with you, of the United States dealing directly with Hamas?
Well, I think that every single country should be trying to get out all of their citizens. In an ideal world, Israel would be able to do this on behalf of all of the countries that are represented in the cohort of hostages that are still remaining. You remember, Chris, that the original 251 hostages that were taken represented over 40 countries. But now there are only 120 hostages left. They represent 24 different countries. They are composed of Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists. And I think it's critical that if one country cannot negotiate a situation to free these human beings who are cherished, then the individual countries that are represented in that group have to start advocating for their citizens.
John, in terms of blame, when you look at the dynamic here, do you believe this is about Israel's reluctance to do what's necessary to get the hostages back, or is this just a strong man play by Hamas and that they don't want to give up the leverage that they have?
So I'll talk in a second about blame, but I even want to add on to your first question and Rachel's answer to it, which is you're catching us in Washington, D.C., our 10th or 11th trip in the last 8.5 months, on Juneteenth, a holiday that celebrates emancipation. This morning with jet lag, I got up and gotten some rare exercise. In this city of Washington, D.C., this country, the United States of America, is so steeped with notions of liberty and freedom and emancipation. And I ran by, and there's the Lincoln Memorial and MLK Jr. and all the others here in Washington. And they're all about this theme of the lengths that Americans go to emancipate their people. And there are 8 Americans still being held in Gaza, and I would expect that this country today would do no less than we've always done to liberate people who need that emancipation. And the hostages are there. When it comes to your question of blame, Chris, I think that it's been problematic between Israel and Hamas, but we consistently say we have all failed. Israel, Hamas, the United States, Qatar, Egypt as mediators, we as parents. The world has failed these hostages for 257 days. These are people who were largely taken from a music festival, their beds. These are people who were just pulled into this conflict, and somehow the world has to figure out once and for all, what are we all going to do to get these people freed and back to their loved ones?
You know, Rachel, the last time I saw you, you had a sense that you were going to hear from your son at some point, and then you're one of the fortunate in this calamity that you're in, where he wound up being one of the messengers, that you got to see him on video, and all things considered, he looked pretty good. What sustains your optimism, your hope? We heard the other day, one of them said tens of hostages remain alive. Tens. It's a very limiting number. It's almost like they may know something. Well, what do you do with that?
Well, I think that you can appreciate, Chris, being a father yourself, that hope is mandatory when it comes to our children. Optimism is mandatory. We are faith-filled people, and I have to believe, I believe and I have to believe that I will see my only son again. And it's what makes me get up every morning, put on this costume of a human being, and run as fast as I can all over the world, turning over every stone in hopes that I will make it today, that I get my son back. And it's not advice. It's not a suggestion. We command ourselves every morning to stay hopeful. We say that it's mandatory, and it's an innate primal reaction that any loved one has when they feel that their child, parent, spouse, brother, sister are in danger. And that's what all of us hostage families do.
The tape on your chest that you both have is, of course, the days that the kids, that these people have been gone. Did the senators and the people you met with in D.C. give you any hope that there's any energy to get this over anytime soon and bring home your son and all the others who are still hostage?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, one of the things that has given me a little bit of optimism on this current visit to D.C. is we've sat in rooms where together it's Democrats and it's Republicans, and they are saying to each other, not just to us, because they know we'd want to hear it, but they're saying to each other, people, this is not an issue of Democrats or Republicans. This is an issue of humanity. This is an issue of human beings who need to be rescued. Yep. We need to be focused on that, and that's what we got to do. And the other piece of that is it's so easy to take this situation and make it more complex, get it caught up in peace in the Middle East, the day after plans, all of these other things. And we've heard senators on this trip say, let's make it simpler. We have one mission, and that is get out the hostages. Everything else can be dealt with, and it will be dealt with afterwards. But right now, let's get out the hostages. And I know it's not simple. We're dealing in a complex region of the world, but I like the unity and the sharpness of mission that we're hearing on this particular visit.
Well, John and Rachel, I've said it as many times as I can, and I'll keep saying it. Anything you need, anytime, we're a call away. We will not forget. I promise you that.
Thank you.
Chris, we appreciate you continuing to keep up the awareness and tell the story. Thank you.
Whenever you want. I cannot wait to see you reunited with your son. That's the only moment I'm looking forward to. Until then,
Amen.
I'll speak to you soon.
Too.